Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of Amplifying Voices webinar from Northern Power Women. I am Simone Roche, and I'm the founder of Northern Power Women, and I'm delighted this afternoon to introduce the wonderful Karen Finlayson, who is a partner in risk assurance at PwC based over in fabulous Leeds. You've been there for 22 years. Did they take you out of a pram? Is that what happened?
I wish. I wish it took me a good 15 years. So yeah.
Well, you spent some time working in industry. You were banking, retail, manufacturing, public sector, but currently you are a UK regions leader for UK government and health industries and multicultural network in the north. You are a mum. You're on the board of governors at Sheffield, Hallam, and you're also the chair of the Audit Committee at Doncaster Children's Services Trust. Wow, they are big. They're big side hustle roles there, Karen, aren't they?
They are, but there were two things I'm passionate about, so I couldn't say no when I got the offer.
You are a massive advocate of equality, diversity and inclusion, and you've been driving this agenda across the firm. You are a reluctant role model, though, I think, when you are clearly, an awarded the Senior Leader in Professional Services at the British Black Business Awards in 2018, and you were named Partner of the Year at the Yorkshire Accountancy Awards in 2019, and you significantly contribute to PwC, and you also won the D&I award at the Yorkshire Accountancy Awards. You must have a massive shelf.
Yeah, between my son's football trophies, and I think he thinks I'm in competition, but that'll be it for a while. I think. Yeah, I've been very, very lucky in that regard. Thank you.
On this journey, is there a piece of advice that, as you've navigated your way through, is there a piece of advice that has stuck with you?
Oh gosh, yeah, enjoy it. It has to be. I think anything I've ever done in my career, professionally, personally, has always been you've got to enjoy the ride. The journey is more important than the destination. And looking back and reflecting on some of the memories, the highs and the lows, it makes it all worthwhile. So yeah, definitely enjoy the journey, definitely.
And what got you, where did you make your career decisions from? I think I kind of reflect back my own journey. I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up, still probably working it out. But what influenced your decisions?
So there were a couple of things really. There were two. I always wanted to go into business. So I always wanted to work in sort of the business finance sector, so that was always there at the back of my mind. I never genuinely thought I'd end up being at PwC, and I generally didn't think I'd ever be a partner when I was at school. And we were talking about this at the weekend with my son, because he's sort of A-levels, middle of his A-levels, about how do you know what you want to do. So I always knew I wanted to go into business and finance. But the other thing actually that prompted me on was really around people telling me that I could never do it, and people kind of constantly thinking, go into something that was probably not necessarily what I'd want to do, because they just didn't think I'd have the ability to do it. So that always spurred me on. And again, to sort of try and prove people wrong, and also to prove to myself that I could do it, really. I don't think I necessarily, when I was at school, I definitely didn't get the best out of the education system, and I had to spend a lot of time working and learning. And I went back to university as a sort of to do a postgrad, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do from an academic point of view anyway. But yeah, so that was really I always silenced my critics, as my mother would say.
Are there any decisions you would have, you've gone from, like we said, public sector into retail, different sectors, and now obviously at PwC for a considerable amount of time. Are there anything you would have changed along the way? Yeah,
I think I would have definitely gone to university full time. And I think a lot of the reason I didn't at the time was because I lacked the confidence to do it. However, I do believe that me not going also was advantageous, because I had the opportunity to experience quite a lot of career. So I've worked every day of my life since I was 16 years old. I've only ever had 9 months off when I had my son. So my other regret was not to have a gap year. so I'm probably going to have my first gap year when I retire, whenever that is, because I always feel like I missed out on those kind of I don't know, those kind of years where I didn't have any responsibilities and I didn't have to think about work and things. And so, yeah, not going to university full time and not having that sort of gap year to sort of explore. I was straight into working and learning. I went to night school for the first 5 years of my career, doing my accountancy, O-levels, A-levels, and then back into higher education to do a business and finance postgraduate qualification. So, and that was all when I was still working. So, yeah.
And at what point, you sort of said earlier, there was someone along the journey that kind of said, oh, you can't do this, or, you know, whatever. At what point in your journey was that? Was that right at the start? Was that at night school, or? So
it was when I worked for, I'll not mention any names. So there was two particular occasions. There was one when I was working in the accountancy department of a retail manufacturing company. And I was, I thought, oh, actually, I quite fancy, becoming a proper accountant rather than like a sales clerk as I was at the time. And I can remember the the head of department at the time was, oh, don't want to worry yourself about that, I don't think it's right for you. And I was kind of like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, well, you'll have to, you'd have to go and do all these qualifications, blah, blah, blah. And so I think it was just his way of probably thinking because I'd already kind of stepped into that world of work, he just probably didn't think going more down the sort of academia route, which I had to in the end, was right for me. So that was the first thing, and so it made me curious because I was kind of like, well, why not me? And that's when I started going into like researching and getting involved in night school classes so I could learn. I didn't want to stop working at that point, and I did actually go and ask them if they would sponsor me through night school or evening classes, which meant me having to leave early, and they wouldn't, so I left. So I left there and went to a different company. I went into banking at that point, and they were willing to sponsor me actually, and they were willing to invest in me doing a course as well. So I stayed there for 2 years, and then that's when I left, went into the public sector. But then there was another incident when I went to a recruitment agency in Leeds, looking to join an accountancy firm, and again they were very much, oh, I don't think it's right for you, you've not got the right background, you've not got the right academic qualifications, blah blah blah, all the same stuff again. And again, luckily I did apply to PwC, and they had very different views around it, and actually valued my experience. So, and then the rest is history, as they say. But yeah, there was a few critical moments where actually it would have been nice to feel that someone was being more supportive about my choices, and they weren't for whatever reason, and so I just decided to ignore them anyway.
You talked about not having, you didn't have the confidence. So at what point do you think you gain that to be able to go, you know what, I'm going to crack on here? Because it would have been easy to have believed them, wouldn't it? It'd been easier to, listen to the hype and go, right, well, I'll just stay here. I'll just make do.
Yeah, I think it was more when I went back. There were two things that happened. It was more when I went back to night school and I started passing exams and things. Because, like I said, I didn't necessarily excel academically at school, and it just gave me confidence in myself. I thought, actually, if I work hard at this, I can keep going. So that was the first one. But then the other one was really just that sort of resilience piece of just not wanting to being told by someone else what I could and could not do. I wanted to decide what I did and want to do with my career. And so I just decided that I had nothing to lose. I thought, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? And so, yes, I just continued to go to night school and continue to study. And actually I really enjoyed it because I'd found what I wanted to do. So it was easier. And I think if I'd have gone to university when I was younger and I wasn't clear what I wanted to do, I probably would have struggled, if I'm honest, because again, you need to be committed to something like that. And I knew it was business and finance, but I just didn't know what. So maybe it would have been a different story if I'd have gone to university full time.
So what was about a mistake along the way, other than not taking your gap year?
No, I'm gonna do it.
And what did it teach you? Was there something along the way?
Yeah, I think for me, it's not one mistake, but I can remember being quite naive when I started out in my career, and so I didn't really appreciate the value of you know, networking and knowing people, and I was very easy to listen to what other, you know, other people's views and other people's perceptions of individuals. And so I've ended up with a couple of people in my career that at quite of an early stage when I first met them, I would have written them off, because and rather than taking the time to know them and understand them and learn about them, I was kind of very too easily influenced by other people who I thought at the time were wiser than me. But what I learned was that it was, you know, their own perceptions or their own views of individuals rather than actually the reality. And so and a couple of people, like I say, quite early on in my career, I wish now that I would not have necessarily listened and found out for myself, because people are different, and people are, you know, not everybody's going to have the same point of view. So I think I've always learnt now is not to necessarily follow people's perceptions and find out the reality of the person, learn the facts, learn about that individual. What normally binds me personally with a person is more about their values rather than anything else, and some of their core beliefs, and that makes a difference. And it's hard to get to know that, right, when you first meet somebody, and that takes a bit of time. So so it was really like listening to people and not necessarily forming my own judgments and opinions about people, which I do now. I'm a lot more I'm a lot more self-aware, and I'm a lot more aware of what the kind of people that are right for me.
You talked about resilience, and I think we're in a period of time now in the world where resilience is talked about quite a lot, and we've obviously got real challenges with our young people who are going to we're facing masses of unemployment, people who are being massively experienced being made redundant. When you've obviously had to put that resilience jacket on as you've kind of plowed through your career. Was that quite a long time ago, or is it have you always found that you've had to be resilient?
So the hardest time for me really was after I had my son. So he's 17 now, so it's quite a while ago. And after I had my son, and then my marriage broke down within about 2 years of, and obviously I wanted to come back to work to have a career. So I had these three things going on in my life: being a new mum, being a divorcee, and trying to make a way in my career. And I have to say it's probably the hardest 2 years of my life, going through that and just trying to keep everything balanced, everything emotionally, keeping myself in check, and still being, seen at work as being someone who was confident and capable. And I think, a few things happened where I was in some respects, I was quite lucky that I had a very strong group of friends and family who were really supportive. And so that really helped me a lot. But yeah, those couple of years were quite difficult, just trying to work out how I was going to make it work, and being worried that, if I couldn't, I was going to fail being a mum, I was going to fail at my career. I'd already failed in my marriage. So there was one down, two to go in my mind. So it was just trying to make sure that I was able to sustain it and sustain my own kind of emotional well-being. But the resilience piece, I think, is always, deep inside me. I'm quite a resilient person. I think, unfortunately, life is not necessarily always a white picket fence and sugar coated and all the rest of it. And you're very lucky if that is how your life is. But what I've learned, that life is not that straightforward for most people. And even though people may not see it on the surface, people have got their own battles and their own challenges. And so this, how people learn to be resilient, I think is really, really important. If you're not already resilient, some people naturally are. Some people have to really work a bit harder at being resilient and finding out what it is about them that they need to do to give themselves that space, that emotional, that someone call it, what is it? Like a psychological hug, isn't it? In terms of making sure you look after yourself and making sure that you don't break. I do find that society, for whatever reason, has had to take on a lot, and it does feel a lot more fragile than it probably was 20 years ago, definitely. And especially if you're a young person today, I think they've got quite a few challenges they need to be able to be quite resilient to get through.
And what advice would you give to that 25-year-old self about work-life balance? And because clearly you've had some challenges, you suddenly marriage breakdown, small child, trying to get back into your role. How's work-life balance figured along your way, and what advice would you give to that 25-year-old?
Yeah, well, the first one, and I still maintain this today, is that work, rest and play. I've always been a big sort of, do you remember the Mars bar advert? That used to be the Mars bar, didn't it? It was, and that's where I got it when I was younger. I try not to eat too many anymore. But that work, rest and play, because work, I've always been a hard worker. It's always just part of who I am. But then, making sure I take that time out to rest and take time out with my friends. So one of the things I do every year, I'm quite selfish, I always book a day at a spa without anybody at all, and just take myself off and with a book, and just don't have any distractions. And if I ever feel in a position where I feel really overwhelmed, I will do that from time to time, but I haven't been able to this year because I've not been open, so I'll be ready for that. And then the play bit is fun. Everything I've done in my life, I've always enjoyed, so it makes it so much easier, even if it's stressful, if you're enjoying it. And I think, like I say, the other bit for me is surround yourself by good people. I genuinely, I don't know how I would have coped through some of the more challenging periods if I'd not had a great network of friends who were very supportive, very unconditional, actually. And I'm very, very grateful for my family and friends who have always been, they've put up with me. And they've allowed me to be me, which again, not everybody has the benefit of having. They've always been exceptionally supportive and allowed me to be me.
And can you do that now at PwC in your role? Do you find you've had to learn that it's okay, it's especially good to be you, at work? I remember we've had many conversations with different people, and it's almost like, oh God, I felt like I had to play a dress up for a few years, and then suddenly kind of got the confidence to go, you know what, actually, I'm all right.
Yeah, one of my favourite moments, there was a security guard who used to work here in Leeds, actually, he's left. And for a couple of years, and I remember I got made partner, and he said to me, I thought you were already a partner. And I said, it's my fake it till you make it. And I says, and he goes, I really did. And I says, no, you do kind of have to, I won't say put on a persona, but I think you have to kind of put yourself in a position where you do feel confident in your own abilities enough to be able to front something. Because I think if you're not, that's where people can quite easily undermine your confidence. And so I wouldn't say I've faked it till I've made it. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think there has been times where I've had to kind of dust myself down and put myself, check myself and give myself a bit of a self-talk before I've gone into certain meetings or scenarios, to give myself that kind of the confidence that I can do it. But I do think as well with the imposter syndrome, I think that's something that when I mentor people, they speak a lot about this whole imposter syndrome, and I can honestly say I wouldn't say I've never felt that I'm not worthy to have a seat at the table. If I'm honest, it's been more about making sure that I don't undermine myself. Yeah. And making sure that I don't sabotage myself in terms of being negative with the self-talk, and all, because people will make mistakes and people will I won't always get things 100% right, but I will always try my best, and I'll always plan, I'll prepare and make sure that I can always do my best. So yeah, and get through it that way. But no, there's been yeah, I've not always got it right. I can assure you.
We've got a few questions started coming in quite early, actually. Kath, would you like to ask your question? Because I think this is one that Karen will love.
Hi Karen, my question was really about whether things have changed, or whether you think young girls and young women have more confidence in their own abilities, or whether we've still got a long way to go before we close that gender pay gap, whatever you want to call it.
Good question. Good question, and I see with women, there's two things that have happened for me with women. So you've got, you know, a lot more women who are in these fantastic positions, you know, and they've been able to kind of either been self-made or they've made it in the corporate ladder, you know, and there's lots of different networks and support places to be able to help them come through those glass ceilings. But the bit for me that I don't like, and you know, I don't know, I can't see who's on the other side of this screen, so I'm going to say it, is the impact on social media on girls. It really, really upsets me how they get so influenced and so, I'd say, manipulated by what they see on social media and how they think they should look and how they behave based on various, you know, different images that are presented to them. And that, I think, undermines all that beautiful talent that sits there, that is there. And that's the bit that worries me, because I know some really bright, wonderful young girls, you know, who are my son's age, but they still have this underlying issue around confidence, how they look, and all those kind of things that I just think, you know, that's come, I think, as a consequence of social media and the image thing rather than their actual abilities and talent, which is a real shame.
It is, hence the culture, isn't it? Always on, isn't it? There's no, you don't go to school or into education and then go home at the end. It's just non-stop, isn't it? And it, whilst it has many positives, I think there's a, you know, there can be a negativity. Thank you, Kath. I'm liking the background there, Kath. It's very cool.
Hi, Kath.
David.
Oh, hello.
Hello, David. How's lovely? How's Suffolk?
Lovely, bright and sunny today. Thank you.
Jealous. I'm jealous.
Sun shines on the righteous, you see.
David, you've got a question for Karen.
Yes, I'm trying to remember what I typed a moment ago. I thought very interesting. You were saying, you know, as you progress in your career, you were being told, oh, you've not got the right qualifications or credentials. I actually think that was unconscious bias at play, and actually what was driving those comments were the fact that you are a woman and you are a black woman, and that was causing people to find an alternative way of expressing their reluctance to progress you.
So my quick answer to that is yes. I do, yeah. And you know, it's one of those things, isn't it? And I had this conversation recently, because obviously with the BLM movement, and you know, would they have ever said it? Oh, it's because you're black, and you know, they wouldn't have ever said that. But that's exactly how it felt. You know, if I'd have had you know, I was more well-spoken. Although I think I am well-spoken because I come from Yorkshire, so I am well-spoken. And, you know, if I looked a different way and I had a different CV that had said Oxford or Cambridge, then, yeah, they would have not even doubted what was stood in front of them. But I didn't have any of those things. So I think that they, you know, they already made that assumption that I wasn't able, which is completely wrong.
I think the use of language needs to be given some really careful thought and consideration. There was a fascinating little column in The Economist a few weeks ago, the Johnson column, talking about how we're moving away from overt racism to something that's called racialization. And they were talking about a black American female football player. And the remarks are, oh, she's good because of her athleticism, as opposed to she's good because she studied the game and she's read up and she's, you know, cognitively good as well as physically able.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. There's lots, and that's one of the things about, you know, stereotypes, is that, you know, people shouldn't make those assumptions, and they shouldn't, you know, what they see on paper. They need to, you know, they need to find out and learn more. So no, it's yeah, it's a challenge. It definitely has been, and I hope, you know, with the BLM movement, this gives the opportunity for people to call those things out, and for people not to make those preconceived views about individuals.
Well, my hope seeing you as a partner of PwC, and I'm an old white white bloke 61, so I've lived through all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I just hope that you can smash a few systems apart, because actually if we just see a different person at the table and no change coming about, has that made the difference we need to see happen? So I just wish you well, and all power to your elbow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, David.
Pleasure.
Talking about Black Lives Matters, we were talking about this just before we came on the call, and we've been doing a series around Amplifying Voices. And do you think the time is now? I do worry slightly that some of the narrative it seems to have died down as people are getting back to normal. And I really hope that this time is now to make the change, not to keep talking about it, but to actually do. What's your take? And obviously you've got a key role within PwC around the agenda.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. The time is now. I think, for me, the whole ripping down of the statue in Bristol was quite symbolic, not just because he was a slave trader and they've been asking for it to, it'd been known for a while, but also because it's been there for years and people have been protesting about it for years. So I think if the government and systems and corporates and the society as a whole don't do something about it, we'll see, they'll take their frustration out in anger, and that's what we've seen. That's why it's ended up being the way that it's ended up being, the protests and things. So avoid it or ignore it at your peril would be my advice, really, is that if you don't, there will be another uprising, I guess, call it that. So I do think they should take it seriously. They need to look at it and they need to do it now. I think there has been too much talk about it, and people need to be seeing clear actions. You can't say that there's not enough black talented people in this country to be involved in lots of different positions, lots of different professions. So I think stop talking about it and stop putting plans and drawing up plans and all those kind of things, and actually do something positive and actually interrupt the pattern. I don't know why people are scared. We talked about this before, Simone. Sometimes people are scared to kind of call it out, and they need to be able to call it out in a positive and a constructive way. But people need to listen, because if they don't, then I think we'll see more of the frustration and the anxieties that we've seen.
But do you think there is people not wanting to do the wrong thing, so therefore will think, well, I'll sit over here and watch and I'll copy what they do? Are there any practical steps, or is it absolutely dependent on the culture of the organisation wanting to do something?
Yeah, I think there has to be a willingness of the organisation to want to do something. All organisations have culture, a culture that is, just part of how they breathe, how they operate. But they have to do something. They have to look at how do people get promoted in their organisation? How do people end up in more senior positions? How do people have influence? And they need to be making sure that they're disrupting some of those norms if it's not equitable and not diverse. And that takes a brave leader. It takes a brave CEO to do that and make a genuine commitment to change those things and be comfortable with with what that looks like, and actually be clear about what does it look like. If I want a diverse, inclusive workplace environment, what does that actually look like? Because some people do not articulate it, and if that means you have to set targets, quotas, or change things that people have become it's the acceptable norm, then you have to be able to be brave to do that and do it for the right reasons. There's so much research out there that shows that diversity does actually improve results and improves business results. So it's not that the evidence isn't there to support why it's a good thing to do and why it's the right thing to do. It's just that people just need to get on with it.
Cracking on again. That Northern way, isn't it?
It is.
Alex, forgive me, I'm going out of sequence, but Rakshar, you've got a question for Karen.
Thanks, Simone, and hi, Karen. I just want to say I'm actually on 2 weeks leave, but when I saw your webinar, I just thought, okay, I have to dive into this. And thank you so much. It's just so fantastic to have really, strong, positive role models. So my question is this. I think one thing that makes me feel very sad and frustrated is that I still see a lot of really talented women from BAME background not achieving their potential in the workplace. So what would be your advice to them? Like how do they build their influence? How do they kind of get promoted? We know the evidence is there that diverse teams do better, but I still feel in some places there's still a long way to go.
Yeah. So, and thank you, Raksha. Lovely to meet you, and thanks for interrupting your holidays. Yeah, a couple of things on that. I think one of the is not to necessarily, don't let the knockbacks affect you so much that it undermines your confidence to keep going. So that's, that was one of my kind of survival techniques, I guess, to keep going, because when you do get put down, or you get people who don't believe in you, it can be soul destroying. So that's the first piece of advice. But the second one is really around then looking out for sponsors and sponsors within your organization who are going to be able to support you. Some people don't like the word sponsors, because obviously to be a sponsor you have to have an influence. And people sometimes are a little bit uncomfortable with that whole dynamic of the power play and how that works in practice. But the reality is, in most corporates in particular, that you do have this sort of sponsorship advocacy that is that sort of ripples along the systems, and that people will be supportive of you without you actually really knowing it, if you've got good sponsorships and advocacy. So seek out those sponsors and advocates who are going to give you the opportunity, who are going to lift you up basically, and make it, and give you the opportunities. And again, it depends on the organization, because obviously people have different cultures, but like I say, in ours it's very much around sponsorship and advocacy, as well as obviously doing your role well. And in terms, and then the other thing is one that we picked up on through having some of the one-to-one sessions where we've had, is this whole, people feel if they speak out that then it's held against them. My only sort of advice on that is now is the time. Now is the time where actually you can speak out, and in most scenarios you will be heard, especially if you're heard, if there's a few people who've got the same feedback, because it is, and there's no organization now that can sort of say, oh, we're not aware of it, or we're not, we don't understand it. And if they not understand, then they need to educate themselves. But I do think there is an opportunity now to sort of have some of those more challenging conversations, but I don't underestimate it. It's very difficult, and people do not want to stand out if they seem to be going against the grain. So it has to take a level of bravery and courage to do that, and stay resilient.
Thanks, Raksha.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Let's talk about role model. You are a partner at PwC, one of the big four, massive organisation. Is this something you've embraced, being a role model, or has it made you uncomfortable?
At the very outset, it made me uncomfortable, if I'm honest. And there were a couple of reasons for that. And I can remember going through one of my panels as a partner panels, and I was being interviewed, and they were asking me all these questions about my personal life. And I told you I was a single mum and got divorced and things, and so for me it just felt a little bit raw. I felt I didn't really want to disclose that much of myself to my work or to my employers really at that particular point in time. And even though I'd worked here for years, and some people didn't even know I was a single parent, or even know that, because I've not ever shared it. So there were just things about my life that I just wanted to keep private. So being a role model for me at the time felt more around, I had to give a piece of myself that I just wasn't ready to give, if I'm honest. But it took me a little while to get used to that. And that was more because people were, I've always wanted to meet someone like you who's in a position who you've had the experience, you've had the career, or you've got the career, and seeing someone in your position, it's really important. It was really important to them. So then I had to I had to check in with myself and get more comfortable talking about who I was, my story. I do keep as much as I can my private life private, but it was more around that whole sense of having to share myself really in a way that I just had not necessarily expected. But now I'm fine with it now. I'm fine I'm fine if people want to refer to me as that. I am human after all, so I'm not perfect by any stretch, but so I am more comfortable with that label, I guess.
We did an event together at Asda head office in Leeds many years ago with IPPR North. It was like a State of the North kind of conference with Northern Power Women and IPPR North, two really quite disparate bodies coming together.
Yeah.
And I remember asking you, would you join the panel? And there was still, and that was probably about 3 years ago, there was definitely reluctance then. And I'm like, but you're a role model. I'm a big fan, and it's a sense of responsibility, isn't it? And sometimes you think, oh God, it is #awkward. Did I just say sorry? But there is something in that about being that visible role model, and whatever people see you as, I always think there's something so positive about. I think I have the best job in the world being able to make accessible so many phenomenal role models. Yeah. Because sometimes when you've got the title of partner, or you've got this title or whatever, it can seem a long way away. So I think the more that so everyone on this session today, you're all role models.
Yeah.
Fun.
And I always, once I got comfortable with it, and I had to talk it through with one of my mentors at the time, and he sort of challenged me, why are you so uncomfortable with it? And I think, there was that sense of responsibility, that it was just like, oh, I don't want to be responsible for anybody else. But then again, he was great, and he just said, look, Karen, you've always said that you wanted to use your, influence for good. And as part of that, you will have to share more of yourself. And so I had to kind of grapple with that between me. But in my personal life, I'm still Kaz to my friends, and I'm still Harvey's mum to Harvey's mates. So that's quite all right.
And what advice would you give to people building that network? You build, where do you start? People think, well, I'll just join that and I'll pay that fee and I've all of a sudden got a network. But actually, you've got to invest in it, haven't you? You've got to invest time in building a network.
Yeah, you do. You definitely have to invest time. And the amount of times actually that people have sort of circled back around in my life that I've met, like yourself, Simone. We always, every now and again, our paths just keep crossing, which is great. But yeah, so definitely in terms of building your network, and I always think you always need to give something as well when you meet someone in your network. So you give something, and they take something. And I think it is that connectivity, and being able to reach out to people who were there generally to help you and help open doors for you, help you understand, help you learn about different parts of industry or different people. And it has a ripple effect. I think you've probably seen this as well yourself, Simone. You've probably met loads of great people through loads of great people who also know loads of great people, and it kind of builds up and it has a momentum. And so I think the power of networks was something I never really probably appreciated until I'd say probably my 30s actually. But now I would definitely encourage young women, back to the first question I had, to make sure they use it and pick wisely. Definitely pick wisely, pick the right people.
Well, we're talking of picking wisely. The next person I'm going to hand over to for a question, which is, it's nothing to do with networking, this one, but actually Alex and I met on Twitter, didn't we, a few years ago, and it was a good Twitter intervention. Alex had put a blog out there about MIPIM, the property conference, and it was like, there's more women there now, but where's our young people? And we engaged over that it's a different type of networking, isn't it? Because you're engaged by the passion in that subject. But and this has got nothing to do with that, Alex. This is just a nosy question from Alex.
Hi, Karen. Hi,
Alex.
I wondered how you finding lockdown? How did you find it? You know, it's been months, so you sound very resilient, but you know, how did you find it?
Like everybody else, I've got my COVID belly going on, so that's not good. So actually, it was really weird. So I was one of the I was working up in Newcastle on the, is it 23rd? Was it 23rd or the 16th of March? We went into lockdown.
23rd.
And I can remember being up in Newcastle. I was working up, and I thought, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. So I rang my son up. I'm like, right, I'm on my way home. I'm going to stop at the garage. I'm going to get loads of food in because, you know, I've not been shopping or anything. So I went home, and to the first couple of weeks, and I thought, God, this is real. This is serious. And I can remember watching the news for like 1 in the morning. I'm thinking, my God, what's it going to be like? But thinking in my head at the time, oh, we might be back at work, you know, or back in 2 or 3 weeks. And actually, the first week, fine. But after about week 3 or 4, I found it really hard. And that was just because I was missing my friends. I was just missing leaving my room. I've never spent that much time in my house. And so I really had to just kind of get into another routine and just kind of rejig my day. I did, and we, like now, lots of Zoom calls, lots of meetings over the laptop, which was quite exhausting, as well as we were trying to, you know, we've got 22,000 people at PwC, and we literally just went into, you know, turned to working virtually. That they needed a lot of support as well, not with the technology, but just again mentally and emotionally. And so we as leaders had to step up and make sure we reached out to our teams and things. So the first, after week 3 or 4, I was exhausted. I can honestly say I wasn't, and I've not done anything. I've not been anywhere. So yeah, I found it really hard. But then I kind of hit a bit of a corner and was able to get into a new, healthier routine. But we've got a dog, thank God. You know, thank God for the dog. He's had about 6 walks a day. He loves lockdown, and just got into a bit of a pattern and a routine, and making sure. Then we did. You know, I'm sure we've all done it. Had the Zoom quizzes, and you know the regular catch up over fizz on Zoom calls and things like that. So I just got into a nice, healthy pattern. But funnily enough, this weekend we went to Centre Parks with my girlfriends and their families and things. There was 16 of us. And it was just so emotional. It was so, because we booked it before lockdown and we didn't think we'd get a chance to go. So we went this weekend, and it was so emotional, and the kids and everything, just being able to see each other and you know, visually was just so, yeah, we there was a few tears. It was great. But no, I did genuinely struggle with it more than I thought the first couple of weeks, because it was just such a shock. But no, it's but then, sorry, just before, I'll shut up on this. But then, but the other thing that actually I found, I'm learning to play the piano. So, but what I did find is I had more time to do things that I don't normally get a chance to do because I wasn't traveling. So the time that I created or found, you know, from not traveling, I then put into something different. And so my piano playing's coming on quite a lot, actually, which is quite good.
The next time, fizz and a piano is what I'm saying.
A bit of a recital, but I'm sure everybody else did. It was a bit of a shock, actually. You know, I've never known a time when I wasn't able just to jump in a car or go out or go and see a friend. It was just really, really hard. But then, yeah, then mentally, I just sort of got myself into a much better place.
Brilliant. Well, I've got, thank you, Alex. Thank you. I've got, sorry, Sally, I think I'll come back to you in a second. But yeah, it was, I think lockdown was just the most surreal kind of time, because it was that not knowing how long it was going to last for, wasn't it? It was really kind of quite just bizarre. Sally, I am with you now. Sorry, that was just my own technology, just inability, all fingers and thumbs, trying to multitask. Sally, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My question was just about, you talked about earlier about diversity and your tips for young women and young people generally about, you know, also calling it out. I wondered what your thoughts were about your senior leaders your fellow senior leaders and about how they have been, or have they had to be encouraged to be more diverse in their team recruitment? And if so, how did that go?
Yeah, so we've always been quite proactive in terms of, definitely for the last 5 years, we've had, quotas, targets around female and BAME. We were one of the first firms to do the gender pay reporting. We do the BAME pay reporting as well, and that's, I think, 2nd year now. So we've always been more overt, I guess, than some other organisations, because we have a very diverse workforce. If I look at the younger generation, we definitely have about a 40% ethnic minority split. But what we haven't been very good at is the progression side, and so we've had to kind of, when the BLM thing event happened with George Floyd, it was really interesting because our PwC in the US were very vocal, because we'd had a member of staff who had been injured and shot, actually, because of racism. So it was, and they were very vocal. And then Kevin Ellis, our chairman and office senior partner, actually did a live web stream with a number of our Black partners, and they talked very candidly about what it was like as a Black person, and some of the racial challenges they'd had personally and professionally, and some of the things that they felt they needed to do. So he was quite positive in acting on it, in terms of putting it out there and getting people to talk about the conversation. Then it had obviously the ripple effect. So we've been having various conversations with, we've got 22,000 people, and some people have found it quite an uncomfortable conversation. And even Kevin himself has said, it was some of the things we talked about they'd not ever realised, and that they were feeling uncomfortable being uncomfortable. And so we've been doing quite a lot of sort of educating, coaching, mentoring, supporting, to be able to get people to get more confident and comfortable about having the conversation about race and what that means to them, and what that means to what they need to do differently within the organisation. So I'm quite proud of what PwC have done, actually, and I'm not just saying that because I work here. We have had some very open, candid, honest conversations about our own organisation, and we've got a plan, an action plan around change and how we're going to shift the dial on things like that. But I don't underestimate, some people are not comfortable talking about race at all, and I think that's that's a societal issue. And Simone and I had this conversation before we all went on here, that some people don't like the term BAME, some people don't like the term Black, so it does become quite difficult for people to navigate, if I'm honest. But I do think people need to be more open about being receptive about having the conversation, and not shooting people down for trying to have the conversation if they're trying to do the right thing.
It is quite difficult. Sorry, I was just going to mention about larger organisations. It is very difficult because of that progression, and the senior leadership themselves are not necessarily reflective of their workforce. So so that in itself means that you don't tend to get people at the top who are able to have that confidence and that power to make a change. So it must be very challenging, but it sounds good. Sorry, I just wanted to mention.
I don't think we won't be done by the time I leave, I'm sure, because it does take so long to get people through into the partnership in particular. I was here sort of 16 years before I made partner, so I'm not saying it's easy, but I genuinely see a change in terms of the effort to really understand it and to educate and to make sure we remove some of those barriers that clearly exist.
I think one of the words that has come up, or I think we've used in different conversations, is about the intention. And it's, so it's okay to not get the word right, or and I'm really sorry, but actually I really care and I want to do something about it. And you can you can almost feel a sort of sense of, in her words, and I'm like, but that's okay. It's okay to, it's you are intent on wanting to do something, and I think that's a good start. Nicola, sorry, just on that theme, are we? You've got a question for Karen.
Yeah, I do. Hi, Karen. It's really nice to see you in, and thank you for this webinar. It's really it's inspiring, and I think really appreciate you going out of your comfort zone to talk about your experiences. I guess my question was really around given your experience and the way that the leadership role that you have in PwC, and how do you feel about positive interventions to address equality, diversity and inclusion? It's something, so I'm working in private equity, not known for its diversity and inclusion. We are really fortunate in that our leadership are massively engaged, and a lot of what you said just now really resonates with me. There's a real drive and engagement and a desire to do something about it. Sometimes we don't know what to do. So I just wanted to get your view on, is it the right thing to take positive action, like when you're thinking about recruitment, progression, things like that, or should we make it more a kind of organic environment, trying to attract people through sort of getting the word out there? What's your view on that?
Okay, good question. So I'm a big believer in positive interventions, and the reason why I say that is because in certain, and again it comes back to the culture, the industry, and obviously in private equity, I can imagine, is that if you let the norm be the norm, you've seen what the norm is, right? You know what the norm is, and it's not always a meritocracy. So I do believe that you do have to interrupt the normal pattern, and if that means a positive intervention, even if it's so much as having a target or a quota, or we're going to use recruitment agencies that are going to specifically identify and look into various different communities that are underrepresented, and we're going to shift the dial. I was reading an article, I think it's Harvard, isn't it? They've done quite a lot on this, and so their intakes in terms of tapping into the black population, and they've done it quite overtly, but that they wouldn't have got a change if they'd not done something differently and focused on it. So people might say, well, it's positive discrimination. No, it's not actually. If it's a positive intervention to change something that that if you don't put something in place to make it happen, then I don't see why there's anything wrong with that. And more companies need to do it. Oh, it's okay, let's just let everything come through as it normally does. Well, we know that what happens because unconscious biases come through. Some of the systems, the way they're set up in terms of even how people are recruited, is unfair, and it's biased. So you have to change something to get a different result. So yes, I'm a supporter of positive interventions. I think you have to be careful that it doesn't tip the other way, that then it becomes a problem for you. But I definitely think that you should definitely challenge the norm to get change.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Thank you so much. I can't believe where the hour has gone, Karen. It always, time literally does fly, and I'm really grateful for brilliant questions, actually, really good questions. Some weeks we get lots of questions, some not so much, but actually I've got David has popped another one in. Now, I'm not going to come back to you, David, because, but I don't, can you see that, Karen?
Yeah, in the chat.
Yeah, so we're talking about role models, which David has referred to. Is a conflict of values emerging between a role model at an individual level working for an organisation that has been censured again for the quality of its work? What does this now demand you do as a senior leader? That's a really heavy question to close this out with, David.
So you might have to say that again, actually. I'm just looking at the other question. Say that again. Sorry, Simone.
So is a conflict of values emerging between being a role model at an individual level working for an organisation that has been censured again for the quality of its work? What does it now demand you do as a senior leader to change its reputation? As the Clash sang, should I stay or should I go? David does like his musical.
He does. Right. So so the professional services firms have been under quite a lot of pressure recently, around you know, some of the work that we do, and how that's been perceived by the press. You know, as a positive role, you know, how I am part of, you know, the senior leader in this firm, and I'm very proud of the firm, and I'm proud of the work we do, and I'm proud of, you know, everything that we've achieved, the impact that we have on society, and our purpose, and how we support other businesses and help in our communities as well. So I am definitely staying. Yeah, clearly there is a challenge from a regulatory perspective, which I don't think I'm not going to comment on here, because we've got different factors that are driving that in the background. But you know, we are in an interesting time where we're even put under the spotlight even more around, you know, the value that we bring to our clients and our communities, and we will always work hard to achieve that as well. So I hope I haven't tried to sidestep the question too much.
Nobody knows where you live, he'll find you. No, listen, I just wanted to thank you so much. I think there's some kind of clear messages. I think it's been a really interesting conversation today, actually. I think there's absolutely, you know, now is the time. And I think I really love that phrase, it is time. We have to interrupt the pattern, because if we keep doing what we've always done, we're just going to keep getting the same thing. And I do believe there's a place in time now to change the narrative. And I think it is about being brave as well. I think the other thing that's come out of this, you know, discussion, obviously Alex asking about, you know, sort of lockdown and your pattern in your story. We're really grateful that you are here as a visible role model. But I think the importance of self-care, the importance of the work, rest and play, I think that's come to the forefront during lockdown as well, hasn't it? Yeah, I know you couldn't go to the spa, but
I walked my dog a lot, and that was very therapeutic.
There was a research report last week worried about the status of dogs' mental health once all their owners go back into work. So maybe now it's the market to grow your doggy daycare business, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah. I have been weaning him off gently, so he's not, you know, we're not there today, so we have been weaning him off gently, so hopefully he'll be all right.
And the sort of final one is, obviously Mars will come in and sponsor your gap year. But what would you do? What are you going to do?
I'd definitely travel around the world. I'd like to go to sort of the far east and down to Australia and that part of the world. I've never been that far east before. I spent a lot of my time in Europe and the West with my Afro-Caribbean roots. So I've tended to go west, but now I'd love to do more of the far east and down to Australia.
Well, we know you're going to get there, and we thank you so much for your time today. Thank you all of you for the chat, for the questions. Brilliant, really great discussion. And Karen, really appreciate you giving your time today. And do you know what? It's been just lovely to hang out for the last hour. Thank you all. Right. Everyone be safe, be well, and don't forget the self-care. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Thanks for your time. Take care, Simone.
Bye, Karen.
Bye.